Even everyday occurrence like walking down the street, for instance, would become an intimidating experience. Although it's difficult to tell exactly who can read and who can't, recent studies show that approximately 5 million Canadians are functionally illiterate. 2 million of them live in Ontario. Illiteracy costs money, too. A new report by the Canadian Business Task Force indicates that illiteracy costs our economy more than $10 billion a year.
You review their vowels, and then you teach them sa, sun, saw, sit.
Ruth Weir has been teaching kids to read for 20 years. She says illiteracy stems from the way children are taught to read.
I think the problem is the underlying assumptions that are used in education. The emphasis on the child having to teach itself. I think that's not a sound philosophy.
Well, I think it's a bigger problem than what us Canadians would like to say, okay? Because they're not counting institutions, they're not counting jails, and they're not counting street folks. So who are they counting?
Tracy Lakier is an ex-biker and former convict. Although he did complete a few years of high school, until 3 years ago, he couldn't read or write.
I was a kid out in the streets at 16 years old, right? So I speak firsthand when I say this. I couldn't read the subway signs. I couldn't read Dundas and Sherbourne and Bay Street. You know, I couldn't read where I was going.
A Frontier College tutor taught him how to read in prison, and he decided to pass it on. He started Beat the Street, a program designed to teach dropouts the 3 R's. All of the kids in Beat the Street are those who have somehow slipped through the cracks of the education system.
It's called TP. It's got 5 letters. Change, E-H-P-E-E.
Like, I just learned how to read really good the last couple of years. I was wondering how I passed. I don't know, I guess I just took my time. And did what I could.
And they just passed you?
Yeah, they just passed me. Because I was a good student, I was always doing my work. So they passed me, I guess, for being there all the time, and I guess trying my hardest.
It's not good enough, though, is it?
No, it's not for me.
A lot of kids are certified with grade 10, grade 9, grade 11, grade whatever. What we're finding is they don't have that. They don't have the basics. They have, if they come in with grade 10, they really have grade 3. They don't have what the system says they do.
They're being cheated.
You can call it that if you wish.
Illiteracy is starting to attract a lot of attention. George Radwanski, who came out with this report on the dropout rate, agrees it's a serious problem in this province.
A great many, if not quite the numerical majority of students, are coming out of school with less than the kind of education they need to be able to be successfully employable.
In fairness to the school, let's just say there's a percent of it that is working. That's a traditional way, and it's working. Okay, so let's just keep doing that. But you should have another alternative. You should have a one-to-one tutoring in schools. You should have other ways and other approaches in the school system. Reluctant to do that, you're going to keep punching out people failing. You're going to keep doing it. The system has to change.
But until that happens, all these kids have is the street.
How about you, Alan? What's the second word? And 10?
Overhead.
Right.
We have fear. Hey, someone who kids are illiterate, or functionally illiterate, I don't care what you want to call them, have fear of paper, period. So we're reluctant to turn pages. We're reluctant to read books. But if you take them on their turf, which is on the street, using street signs, and introducing them to the new world around them, it's fantastic. It's fantastic, and it's working.
Good food, the world's best French fries and burgers.
Yeah. You're giving someone a brand new set of eyes. That's what my tutor did for me, and now I can do just about anything I want to because I have the basics.
I was in Africa.
Tomorrow, Laura takes a look at the high dropout rate in Metro's high schools. Straight ahead, the weather with David Onley, who advises it's going to rain all over your parade tonight, David.
It certainly looks that.
Which is what you do.
Trolley drama and why Johnny can't read. City Vogue with Gord Martineau and...
On Close Up tonight, the third in our 5-part news serial, Board of Education, Why Johnny Can't Read. Laura DiBattista tonight takes a closer look at why 1 in 3 high school students drops out.
I was in a classroom situation where the teachers explained to me how to do things and everything else, and I couldn't understand to do it the way they wanted it done, or it had to be done their way. So when I got into a classroom situation, I got the low marks and everything else, so it didn't work out for me. So I dropped out.
Dropouts are the outcasts, the ones who've been rejected by the system. Now, the common perception is that they're just isolated problem kids. But the truth of the matter is, there are a lot more of them out there than you may think. The numbers are alarming. 1/3 of all children drop out before completing high school. A staggering 79% of children in basic level courses leave school early. 62% of those in general level education drop out, but only 12% of children in advanced levels don't receive their diploma. Unfortunately, a large number of those in the basic and general levels tend to be children of low-income families. When they drop out of school, most of them get dead-end jobs, which tend to keep them around the poverty line. This practice of categorizing students according to their abilities is called streaming. In his report, George Radwanski calls it a social injustice.
The current practice of ability grouping leads to a situation where the child who is a little slower in reading or not as good at math is put in a slower group, which never really has an opportunity to catch up. Doing away with streaming would prevent that disadvantage from being perpetuated.
We don't stream necessarily children until they hit grade 9. It's interesting. One day they're okay, and the next day they've all got to be separated.
McConnell is one of the trustees at the Toronto School Board pushing for an experimental all-level school that would do away with streaming on a trial basis. But not everyone agrees de-streaming is the answer.
What I think we're not recommending is that you can do away with different levels entirely. It seems to us that, in fact, there will continue to be groups of kids who require some special attention.
If you talk to dropouts, alienation is a big part of the reason why they leave school. Many of them say that it's easier to just quit rather than to sit in a classroom feeling bored and inferior to everyone else.
When I was going to school, it's like when you hit a certain age, if you pass or not, they push you on. They just shove you into the next higher grade. And the teachers never showed you how to do the work. It's just like, here, do it.
So how did that make you feel?
I dropped out.
I used to love school, and then, I don't know, everything started falling through, and I just left it behind.
All these kids, if your bottom line is, we were told that we were slow. The system said we will not make it.
And so they didn't.
And they didn't.
I dropped out of school last year. I went most of the year, but then I just found school was boring. So I rather went out and worked, made some money.
Why was school so boring?
I didn't think I had no use for it. I didn't think I was ever going to use it. Some parts of it was interesting, some parts were just boring.
What you've got to do is find the things that they are interested in, find the things that really are career-oriented, things that have some relevance to them. They know they're not going to go to university. We have this terrible, terrible snobbery that says academics are what counts. Academics are just one measure of a person's talents and abilities.
The kinds of jobs that the youngsters who are not successful in school are going to get are the kinds of jobs that are disappearing fastest. And so we're going to have chronically unemployed youngsters, and that to me is a very cruel fate when we do know there are solutions that could prevent that.
All kids, when they graduate out of high school, must be able to read and write and have computing skills that would allow them to survive in society. The importance is to get those skills learned quickly enough so that when you run into the dropout problem, you don't end up having kids dropping out before, in fact, they have got any of those skills together, because then we deal with them again later in adult illiteracy.
Tomorrow, Laura takes a look at school board politics. Up next, the
affect the classroom.
For instance, in our school, we've had a snack program that has been cut this year that used to be for grade 1s and 2s. It's been cut back to only kindergarten. At the same time that we're seeing food banks becoming more and more popular in the city. I think what has happened with the new board, which tends to lean more towards the right, is that they've lost touch with a lot of what's going on, particularly in the city groups in neighborhoods that are largely non-Anglo-Saxon background.
We would like to see the practical measures that arise out of these deliberations and these discussions. And those practical measures, some of those practical measures, cost money. Additional teachers, reducing the class size, better equipment, better books, all cost money. And this is the one thing they don't want to discuss.
It is unfortunate that the right chose to go in there with the deliberate purpose of trying to put the left down and trying to get rid of many policies that had been put in place that are good policies.
Much as I hate to admit it, I happen to think the politics at the board level in many ways is the best thing that happens to it.
Nothing demonstrated the conflict between right and left more dramatically than the elementary school teacher strike this past fall. Years of backroom fighting moved to the streets, and for 4 weeks the system completely forgot about the children.
Just like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved.
They are losing their education over this silliness, and I don't think it's any joke.
We as parents and taxpayers will never in the future again be as complacent and apathetic as we have been in the past.
In any kind of a party politics situation, you get people who don't always speak how they feel on an issue level, because it becomes more important to side with a group. So I think that kind of infighting is reflected in some of the decision-making, too, where there aren't completely honest opinions.
Do you think it's actually sort of impeding the whole education process?
I think it's silly to think that politics won't enter into education because of the basis of education being political in this province. But at the same time, I think at least the particular personalities that play at the board are getting too caught up in their own power play.
I think negative parts were brought out to me during the strike, and I think the negatives are the budgeting that should go into early childhood education and primary education just doesn't. And I think if we as a society want our kids to be well educated, we have to pay for it. Your product is only as good as you pay for.
Tomorrow, Laura